The day is winding down, and wherever you are, the night has begun its gentle hush. Maybe a fan hums softly in the corner, or a lamp glows dim against the wall. The bed welcomes your weight. Pillows fold under you like soft clouds. This is a moment of letting go, a time when the world no longer expects anything from you. Just breathe, just rest. You're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we'll wander through one of the most mysterious ideas in physics and philosophy, the possibility that the future already exists, not as an idea or an intention, but as something real, solid, and unchanging, like a hidden room we've yet to enter. We'll ask quietly, is the passage of time an illusion? Is the now we feel simply one frame of a grander tapestry? Let's settle into the question together, as gently as turning a page in a book you've already started to love. Before we drift too far, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. What time is it there right now? Type it in the comments if you'd like. Your local moment joins others around the world, forming a kind of constellation made not of stars, but of shared stillness. From city windows to forest cabins, our little thoughts about time are floating together now, like paper lanterns in the dusk. So let's begin with something simple, a clock ticking on the nightstand. You've seen it 100 times before, haven't you? The second hand dances forward in even clicks. The numbers don't change because of your thoughts or your wishes. They just keep coming. 10 becomes 11, 11 becomes 12. The future becomes the present, then quickly the past. But if you stop to ask, where exactly is now? The answer slips from your fingers. It's always just arriving, always just gone. We often say time passes, like clouds overhead or footsteps down a hallway. But think about that. When something passes, it moves past us. Yet we don't actually see time moving. We only see change. A leaf falls, a kettle boils, shadows shift, but time itself, we never catch it in the act. So what, exactly, are we observing? And why do we speak as though we're moving through something? Some physicists have asked whether time moves at all. Maybe it doesn't flow. Maybe it just is fixed, permanent, not like a river, but like a frozen lake with clear layers. In this view, your past is still there, unbroken. Your future, too. They don't vanish or materialize. They always existed. You just experience them one moment at a time, like a flashlight beam passing over words on a page. Imagine that for a moment. The most ordinary second of your day, say you sipping tea at 4:07 p.m., doesn't disappear once it's done. It stays lodged in the fabric of reality, like a memory in the mind of the universe. It's not back there, fading away. It's still there, just not currently lit up by your awareness. What if the whole story of your life already exists, beginning to end, coiled like a ribbon in space? You aren't writing it as you go. You're reading it, frame by frame. And each frame already knows the next one. That thought may sound strange, maybe even uncomfortable, but it's one of the quiet possibilities physics entertains, especially when we begin to think of the universe not in terms of time ticking forward, but as a block of space-time, a solid shape where everything that ever happens already has a place. You could think of it like a loaf of bread, not sliced yet. Each slice is a moment. This one, the next, the last. But the loaf already exists whole. We're just moving the knife through it, one thin layer at a time. What would it mean, though, if that loaf was real and the slices you haven't reached yet The future ones were just as fixed as the ones you remember. Some scientists call this the block universe model. In it, time is treated not as a river flowing from past to future, but as a dimension, just like space. If you think of where you are right now, you're sitting or lying somewhere very specific. Your body exists in a place, but what if it also exists in a time? A fixed coordinate in four-dimensional space-time, just as real, just as unchanging. Of course, that's not how it feels. It feels like time is something we're moving through, or something moving past us. It feels like we can change things, choose differently, turn left instead of right, speak or stay silent. But could that be just a feeling? Just one of the side effects of consciousness? It's a bit like a movie reel. The whole film already exists on the roll. Every frame, every scene, every ending. But we only see one frame at a time, projected onto the screen of our awareness. We live the story moment by moment, not realizing the ending might already be spooled just a few feet away. Does that mean we're trapped? That everything is predetermined? Not necessarily. Some interpretations leave room for uncertainty and choice, but others don't. And somewhere between those interpretations lies the curious tension between free will and fate, between movement and stillness, between our daily sense of urgency and the quiet idea that maybe nothing is ever really lost. It's a gentle paradox. The present always feels realist, yet the present never lasts, and the future, always a little ahead of us, like a light just out of reach, might not be waiting. It might already be here, just somewhere else in the block, just beyond the edge of the frame. And if that's true, if the future really does exist, quietly, somewhere in the architecture of reality, why is it that no one can see it coming? A train glides silently through the night, its windows glowing like lanterns. Inside, passengers sit unaware of the role they're about to play in one of Einstein's most mind-stretching thought experiments. Imagine yourself sitting in the middle of that train car. It's moving at a smooth, constant speed. Outside, on the platform, another person watches the train pass. At the precise moment your seat aligns with theirs, two bolts of lightning strike, one at the front of the train, one at the back. From the platform, the observer sees both flashes at once, but you, on the train, see the flash from the front just a little later. Why? Because the train is moving forward. Your eyes are traveling toward the light from the front and away from the light from the back. The light from the back reaches you slightly sooner. For you, the strikes weren't simultaneous, but for the person on the platform, they were. So who's right? Who saw now? Which one of you witnessed the true present? This isn't a trick of perception. It's not about delay or human error. It's built into the structure of reality. According to Einstein's special theory of relativity, simultaneity isn't absolute. There's no single, universal now that spreads across the cosmos. Instead, what counts as now depends on your frame of reference, on how fast you're moving and in which direction. Each observer slices space-time in their own unique way. Your present might be someone else's past or future. That simple realization, arrived at over a century ago, fractured our common sense ideas about time. We like to believe in a shared moment, in a world that moves with us, together. But physics suggests that this harmony is an illusion. Time doesn't tick the same for everyone. Your now's not my now. even though we're both convinced it is. This leads to something stranger. If different observers can disagree about the order of events, then maybe those events don't vanish after they happen. Maybe they don't wait to be created by our decisions. Maybe they just exist already and always, like points in a vast, four-dimensional landscape. You can't erase a mountain by walking away from it, and maybe you can't erase a moment just because it's behind you in time. Consider how we think about space. When you walk across a room, you leave behind each spot you stepped on, but the room doesn't disappear as you move through it. It's all still there. Why shouldn't time be the same? Just because you've moved past a moment doesn't mean it ceased to exist. It might still be there, just out of reach. We tend to believe the future doesn't exist yet, that it's waiting to be shaped by what we do next. But if the laws of physics allow for time to be flexible, if simultaneity depends on where you stand, then what's to stop the future from already being set in place? Not visible to you, perhaps, but real nonetheless. This brings us closer to the heart of the block universe concept. Picture space-time as a giant loaf again, where every slice is a different now. Each slice contains the whole universe at a single moment, but there's no cosmic hand slicing it, no clock ticking the pieces into existence. The loaf exists in its entirety, beginning to end all at once. In this view, you're not a traveler through time. You're a part of time, a structure, a shape. Every breath you've ever taken, every thought you'll ever have, already has its place in the block. You don't cause the next moment to happen. It's already there. You just experience it as your consciousness slides along its thread. It's a strange way to think about yourself. Not as someone forging a path into the unknown, but as someone embedded in a grand, static design. Not as a flame burning through minutes, but as a pattern already woven into the fabric of reality. Still, a question lingers. If the future is already there, why can't we see it? Why are we only allowed to look back, not forward? And why do we feel time moving at all, if it doesn't? Some believe it has to do with information, that what separates past from future is how much we know about them. You remember what happened yesterday. You don't remember tomorrow. But what if that's not because tomorrow doesn't exist, just because it's hidden, inaccessible, like a page we haven't read yet, even though it's already written? The person on the train and the person on the platform disagree about what's happening now, but neither is wrong. Their nows are equally valid. Their slices through space-time are tilted differently. That means your now, right this moment, as you lie in bed, listening to this voice, could be someone else's past or future, and yours, theirs. Reality isn't one long thread pulling everyone in the same direction. It's more like a patchwork quilt, woven from overlapping, intersecting layers of time, all existing side by side. So if we accept that, if we really let that sink in, then what do we say about the future? Is it something yet to be, or something already there, waiting quietly for us to arrive? And if it's already there, then what exactly are we waiting for? The idea that your present might be someone else's past or their future forces us to loosen our grip on the comforting notion of a single, shared moment. If we stretch that thought just a little further, it leads to a strange and disorienting realization. The present isn't special. Not in a cosmic sense, it's just a perspective, a position on a timeline that doesn't flow, but simply exists, like a set of coordinates. This idea first began to bloom in Einstein's own musings. In a letter to the widow of a dear friend, he wrote softly that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. For most of us, that illusion is essential. We anchor our thoughts to it. We feel safe believing that what lies ahead is yet to be formed, and what lies behind is fading away. But if time is a dimension and not a river, then that comfort might be rooted in a falsehood. Think again of the train. Two lightning bolts, one observer standing still, another in motion. Two versions of reality, both internally consistent. This simple setup unravels a thread that leads to the collapse of our common sense view of time. Suddenly, the events we think of as fixed, the birth of a child, the falling of a leaf, the ending of a friendship, aren't marked with any privileged status. Their placement in time depends on how and from where they are seen. Let's step back now. Let's zoom out. Imagine the entire universe as a vast sculpture, a structure that stretches across time, not just space. Within that sculpture is every moment that ever was and ever will be. It doesn't unfold like a play, it simply is. From this vantage point, you could see the moment when the earth formed, when it cooled, when oceans swelled, the first breath of the first creature, the first time someone looked up and wondered what stars were. You could also see this moment, right now, your breath slowing in bed, your fingers curling softly under the covers. In this grand sculpture, nothing vanishes, nothing appears from nothing. Everything exists at once. That includes what we call the future, the next day, the next year, the next century. They're not waiting to happen. They're already part of the whole. And that, perhaps more than anything else, bends our understanding, because it implies that what we think of as coming soon is already there. Just not for us. Not yet. But if we take that idea seriously, a new question emerges. Why can't we move through this sculpture freely? In space, we can travel back and forth, left and right, up and down. Why not in time? Why can't we step into tomorrow the way we step into another room? After all, if time is just another dimension, shouldn't it be symmetric, like space? Physics, interestingly, doesn't have a good reason why not. The fundamental equations, those that govern gravity, motion, electromagnetism, work just as well whether time moves forward or backward. There's nothing in them that insists on a direction. If you filmed a planet orbiting a star, then played it in reverse, the math would still hold. It would look a little odd to us, but nature wouldn't flinch. So the asymmetry, the feeling of flow, doesn't come from the laws of motion. It comes from somewhere else, perhaps from us, from how we perceive change, or from entropy, the measure of disorder. We'll explore that more deeply soon. But for now, sit with this tension, time as a dimension that doesn't prefer forward or backward, and yet one we only ever seem to walk through in one direction. Even in this gentle, contemplative view of the block universe, we can't shake the unease. If the future is already etched into the sculpture, then do we have any power to shape it? Are we just passengers in a predetermined story? Are our choices illusions, made not because we could have chosen otherwise, but because we were always going to? That discomfort is natural, because to exist is to feel dynamic, to feel responsible for our actions. But here, the block universe asks us to consider something harder, that agency, movement, and becoming might be byproducts of our experience, not elements of reality itself. That change might be how consciousness interprets the static geometry of spacetime. We often think of time as a river sweeping us forward, but perhaps we are the river. Perhaps our awareness is what moves, flowing through the block, lighting up each moment like a lantern on a quiet path. We experience only one room at a time, but the house has always been there, from attic to cellar. And yet, if all moments coexist, then somewhere, right now, in another layer of the block, a version of you is waking up for their first day of school. Somewhere else, you are laughing with someone you've yet to meet. And still elsewhere, you are old and quiet and at peace. These versions are not fantasies. They're coordinates, existing not in imagination, but in the architecture of spacetime itself. That thought might feel overwhelming, but it might also be a kind of comfort. Nothing is truly lost. No moment vanishes. Every goodbye, every beginning, every breath is preserved. The universe forgets nothing. It simply is. But that leads to another question, soft and difficult. If the future already exists, quietly, beyond the corner of our perception, why are we only allowed to look backward? Perhaps it has something to do with memory. We can remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. We can replay events in reverse inside our minds, the warmth of a voice, the flicker of a smile, but we can't preview what hasn't yet arrived, or at least we believe we can't. This sense of memory as a one-way window might be more than just a mental quirk. It could be the very thing that makes us feel like time moves at all. Imagine for a moment that your memory worked in the opposite direction. You recalled the future, not the past. You'd remember outcomes before actions, consequences before causes. You'd wake up already aware of what your day would hold, not through habit, but because it was already in your mind. Would that make the future feel real? Would it change how you moved through the day? Or would it simply remove the illusion of uncertainty? Memory feels like a flashlight. It illuminates the path behind us, casting the road ahead into darkness. But maybe the road is always there. Maybe it's just that our light doesn't reach far enough. Or maybe, just maybe, the direction in which we remember is what creates our experience of time flowing. This leads us gently toward the concept of entropy, the measure of disorder in a system. It might not sound like something connected to the future, but it's at the very heart of why we feel time moving forward. A broken cup doesn't leap back together. A cooled cup of tea doesn't suddenly grow warm again. These aren't just habits of the world. They're expressions of entropy increasing. The second law of thermodynamics says that, in an isolated system, disorder tends to rise. It's this one direction in physics, this increasing disorder, that gives time its arrow. The past is tidy. It holds cause before effect. The future is messy, built on uncertainty and chance. That's how it seems. But entropy suggests more than that. It suggests that the reason we remember the past is because it began in a low entropy state, a place of order. And from that order, all experience has unfurled. Memory is not just a function of brains, it's a function of physics. The universe doesn't provide you with memories of the future because those moments are less ordered, more entangled, more dispersed, less available to be remembered. And yet, those future moments might still exist, quietly, in the block, just outside the zone where our memories can shine. Our experience of flow, then, may not be something happening in the universe. It may be something happening inside us, an internal movement across a static landscape, like reading a book page by page. The story exists all at once, but our attention gives it sequence, emotion, urgency. The arrow of time, it seems, is not drawn by clocks, but by the rise of disorder. That simple principle shapes how everything unfolds, from the cooling of stars to the fading of memories, from the crumpling of paper to the decay of cells. Entropy is the universe's way of telling stories forward, and because of it, we perceive time as a river, not because it moves, but because we cannot stop sliding downstream. But pause here for a moment. Let's reflect on that image again. The book, with all its pages already written. The reader, flipping through, one scene at a time. The reader believes they are discovering the plot, one twist after another, but the author already knows how it ends. The reader feels suspense. The book feels still. So which one are we? The reader or the story? If the block universe is real, if the future is there, locked in spacetime's geometry, then our sense of unfolding is just the light of consciousness moving from page to page. Entropy may decide the direction we read in, but it doesn't write the book. It doesn't change the story. It just gives us the illusion that something is happening, when in fact, everything already has. And that's a quiet thought, one that doesn't need to be joyful or tragic. It just is. A kind of stillness beneath the stream of moments, a structure beneath the turbulence, not something we need to control or escape, just something to witness. The stars above you tonight are old. Their light left long ago. Some of them don't exist anymore, but their glow still reaches you. That's not just poetry, it's physics. You are literally seeing into the past every time you look up. The present is a mosaic of signals from different moments. There is no clean boundary, no crisp edge. In a sense, the future's already casting its shadow too, in ways we don't fully understand, in subtle patterns, in delayed signals, in the strange mathematics of entanglement and probability. The block may already contain it all, but like a frozen sculpture touched by warmth, we only feel the edges softening one moment at a time. And if all moments are real, all slices already carved into space-time, then you, right now, listening in the quiet, eyes growing heavier, are not rushing toward anything. You're exactly where you've always been, and always will be, a still point in the structure, a glowing bead on a thread that curves gently through forever. But even that thread, this life, this sequence, this story, raises one more question. If every page of the book exists already, then how is it we still feel suspense? It might be because we're not only the characters inside the story, we're also the readers. We live the narrative from within, but we're also the flickering awareness moving across each sentence. And as readers, we can't skip ahead. We can't see the ending until it arrives. That's what gives us suspense, not because the ending isn't already there, but because we aren't allowed to look at it yet. The future may exist, but it remains veiled not out of cruelty or design, but perhaps because that veil is what makes experience possible at all. We're always peering through a keyhole, always straining to see what lies just beyond the edge. And in that narrow view, the idea of change feels real. Motion feels real. We feel the shift of a second passing, the tug of thought slipping into memory. But just because we feel change, does that mean it truly occurs? Or are we misinterpreting a still world, like someone mistaken a series of still photos for a film? In the block universe, everything is set. The birth of stars, the falling of leaves, the moment you blink. But that doesn't mean those moments are meaningless. It simply means they are permanent. Suspense arises not from uncertainty in the universe, but from blindness in the mind. We can't know what happens next, not because it hasn't happened, but because we are not yet there in our path through space-time. So we invent the idea of becoming. We create a story where we have not yet arrived at the next moment. But from the universe's perspective, if such a thing even exists, we have already arrived. The path is already carved. We are simply discovering it. Still, something doesn't quite settle. If all moments exist, then how do we explain the freshness of now? Why does this moment, this breath, this pause, feel more alive than all others? Why is it that we feel centered in the present, as if it alone were lit from within? This is where the philosophy of time brushes against the boundaries of consciousness. Maybe the present isn't something real, but something projected by the mind. Maybe consciousness moves through space-time, like a light beam through a stained glass window, illuminating one piece of the design at a time. That patch of color feels real because it's lit, but the rest of the pattern still exists in full. It's simply waiting to be seen. This way of thinking leads to another strange possibility. Perhaps time, as we know it, is not a physical thing at all. Perhaps it is a psychological phenomenon, a construct arising from memory, anticipation, and the limitations of awareness. If that's true, then time may not be flowing. Instead, we may be flowing, consciousness drifting across a static universe, carried along by entropy and structure, guided by some rule we don't yet understand. It's not an idea that brings easy comfort. We like to think of the future as unwritten. It gives us a sense of agency. But even if it's already there, that doesn't erase our role in it. We still have to live through it. We still have to choose. And choice, whether or not it changes the structure of reality, still feels like choice from within our frame. That feeling has weight. It shapes who we are. And perhaps that's enough. We may not be shaping time itself, but we are shaping our experience of it. We are the lens through which the universe watches its own pages unfold. You can test this idea in a simple way. Think of a memory, something vivid, not a major life event, just a small, textured moment. A walk to the store, the taste of something sweet, the sound of wind against your coat. Notice how complete it feels, how real. For a moment, it lives again. But you are not in it. You are only remembering. Now ask yourself, what if a moment from your future exists in exactly the same way? Already complete, already present, but not yet remembered. If that's the case, then the future isn't missing. It's simply unlit, just beyond the curve of your consciousness. Like the stars on the far side of the earth, still shining, still there, but hidden by the arc of the horizon. The earth doesn't need to rotate for them to exist. They're just waiting their turn to rise. This shifts how we might think about being. not as a flame that burns forward, consuming the future and leaving behind ash, but as a beam that touches one point at a time across a map that never changes, each point as eternal as the last, each experience already inscribed, and yet still worth living. And still, a question glows in the quiet. If we can never look ahead, then why does it feel like we're always about to? Maybe it has to do with the structure of possibility. We don't just live in the present, we live toward the future. Every thought, every plan, even the smallest hesitation leans forward. You put the kettle on because you expect tea. You set an alarm because you expect to wake. Our lives are saturated with forecasts, hunches, probabilities. Even the feeling of reaching out a hand carries an unspoken trust that the world a moment from now will still be there to catch it. But what if that sense of anticipation isn't about a changing future, but about a fixed one gradually becoming revealed? We don't predict what the universe will create. We intuit what part of the structure we're about to reach. It's as if we're walking a foggy trail, and while we can't see the twists ahead, the path is already there beneath our feet. We're not shaping the terrain. We're moving through a landscape that was always carved. And yet, we hesitate. We imagine forks in the road. We agonize over decisions. We dream of alternate outcomes. Doesn't this suggest that the future is flexible, still unfolding, still open? Maybe. Or maybe the sense of openness is part of the design, a feature of what it means to be inside the block rather than outside it. From within, things appear uncertain. They must. Otherwise, there would be no experience of change at all. Now imagine watching a film where you know the ending. You've seen it before, but you still feel suspense. You still root for the characters, still catch your breath at the sharp turns. Why? Because good storytelling isn't just about surprise. It's about structure, about tension and rhythm, about knowing what's coming and still feeling it as if for the first time. Perhaps consciousness works in a similar way. Maybe your experience of suspense is not a sign that the future is undecided, but a sign that you are embedded inside a masterpiece, one whose plot is perfectly arranged to make each moment feel alive, even when it was never in doubt. Still, science offers us something curious. While the block universe seems to imply everything is fixed, there are interpretations of physics that suggest an element of chance. Quantum mechanics, with all its probabilities and wave functions, doesn't sit neatly inside a static picture. Before a measurement, a particle can be in many states at once. Only when observed does it collapse into a single outcome. This unpredictability at the quantum level raises the question, could the future genuinely be open, at least in some layers of reality? Or is the randomness just a veil, another aspect of the illusion? It's possible that every outcome exists in some form, branching like a tree in a multiverse. Each decision you make, each roll of a dice, spins off a new branch, already present in the full geometry of everything. But even in that branching view, each outcome is still there, not unfolding over time, but fixed in space-time. Whether the universe is one block or a billion, the same mystery remains. The future may be unchangeable, but it still feels like it's approaching us. And in this tension between what is and what feels like becoming, we find something beautiful, something very human. Our desire for freedom, our belief in agency, our dreams of change. They are not errors. They are the contours of our path through the block. The story needs them. They give the journey weight, because even if the story is written, it still needs to be lived. Still, there are moments when the illusion seems to crack. Deja vu, a dream that feels like a memory, a thought that seems to predict something that hasn't yet occurred. These instances are often dismissed as quirks of the brain, but some wonder if they're hints, glitches in the fabric of perception, tiny signals from other slices of the block slipping past the veil. We don't know. We may never know. But perhaps that's part of the design too. Uncertainty gives shape to experience. It softens the edges of reality. It keeps us looking forward, asking, wondering. Because without the question, what happens next, there would be no curiosity, no adventure, no need to keep turning the page. And so we do. Every moment we lean forward into the next, not because we believe it isn't already there, but because we must. To stop would be to drift into stillness, to forget the melody of time, the feeling of suspense, of almost. That is the music. That is the motion. And maybe the future is just the part of the song we haven't heard yet. But then a stranger thought arrives. If the future is already there, if our choices are already made somewhere in the structure, then who or what is doing the choosing? Maybe it's still you, or maybe it's not a you in the way we typically think, a single isolated self pulling the strings, but something more diffuse, more entangled. If every choice you'll ever make already exists in some slice of space-time, then perhaps you are not the chooser, but the chosen path. Not the force that decides, but the curve that was always part of the design. In this view, free will doesn't disappear. It changes shape. It's not the ability to carve new roads, but the fact that the road includes a version of you who sincerely believes they are deciding which way to turn. This might feel like a loss, as though the thrill of agency has been flattened into predestination. But look closer. If the entire shape of space-time already contains your choices, that doesn't mean they weren't real. It means they were always going to be real, always going to happen the way they do. In the experience of making them, that moment of hesitation, the quiet weight of responsibility, that is part of what gives them meaning. It helps to step outside ourselves, if only in imagination. Picture a being who exists beyond the block, not in it, but above it, outside of time entirely. This being wouldn't see events unfold the way we do. They wouldn't ask what happens next. For them, everything would be visible in a single glance. Every star's birth and death, every breath, every decision ever made. Not as a sequence, but as a pattern. Not as a story, but as a shape. To such an observer, time doesn't flow. It has no direction. They would see your entire life at once, stretched like a thread of golden light, every moment glowing, not just the grand ones, even the small silences, the ones you barely noticed as they passed. This perspective raises deep questions. If such a view is possible, then what does it mean to be inside the block? Is time truly something we travel through, or something that travels through us? Are we beings moving through moments, or are we moments in motionless form, experienced one by something else entirely? And then there's the question of identity. If every version of you across time already exists, who are you right now? Are you the whole thread, or just the point currently lit? Are you a complete object in space-time, or are you just the awareness gliding along its length? Maybe the self isn't a fixed point, but a process, a flowing of attention across a static structure, a spotlight tracing the edge of a sculpture. This might sound abstract, but it touches something very personal: the idea that we are more than just minds reacting to the present moment, that we are patterns, complex, beautiful, intricate, woven into the universe, not separate from it, but inseparable, not causing time to move, but animated by its illusion. And yet, we continue to feel choice. We continue to act as though the next moment is blank, that what we do now affects what comes later. And maybe it does, in the only way that matters, experientially. Even if the choice is already carved into the block, the feeling of choosing remains essential. Without it, the pattern would be incomplete. Perhaps this is the paradox at the heart of it all, that we can be both fixed and fluid, that we can be a point on a timeline and a perceiver of time, that we can be the script and the actor, the map and the traveler, the story and the storyteller. And if that's true, then maybe free will isn't about creating something new. It's about stepping into what was always meant to be. It's not about changing the future, but about inhabiting it fully, living through the experience of making the choice, even if the outcome is already known elsewhere in the block. Still, a quiet wonder remains. If all of this exists, if the block universe holds every flicker of choice, every alternate thread, then how does it feel from the outside? What would it mean to see the entirety of time, not from within, but from beyond? To look not at events, but at the total shape they make? Would it be beautiful? Would it be understandable? Or would it be like looking at a tapestry from the wrong side, threads tangled and crossing, each with purpose, but the image still hidden? And if someone could see your life in full, every moment, every choice, every hesitation, would they say it was complete, or would they say it was still becoming? There's something haunting and delicate about that idea, that a life could be both complete and unfinished depending on the vantage point. From within, we see only the curve of the road ahead, the wall of trees closing in around the next bend. But from the outside, maybe it's all laid out in perfect shape, winding, jagged, gentle, bold. We feel our lives in motion, but perhaps they are sculptures already carved, and what we call the present is simply where the light happens to land. Still, we struggle with this vision. It asks us just to loosen our grip on something precious, the belief that the future is ours to shape, that we are not passengers, but authors. If the future exists already, if it's baked into the very structure of space-time, what does that say about our freedom? Are we just characters following a script, reciting lines we never chose? This question sits at the edge of science and philosophy, and it's as old as thought itself. Free will, or the feeling of it, is one of the deepest threads running through human identity. We value it, we fight for it, we base our ethics on it. Without it, the idea of responsibility begins to blur. If we couldn't have done otherwise, then what does it mean to do anything at all? In a fully deterministic universe, every event is the inevitable consequence of what came before. Every decision, every impulse, every word you speak is simply the next step in a chain that began long before you were born. Not random, not spontaneous, just fated. And in the block universe, this determinism takes a spatial form. Your choices don't emerge. They exist, fixed in their proper place on the timeline, like stones embedded in a walkway. But does that really erase agency? Maybe not. Maybe it simply redefines it. Instead of thinking of free will as the power to carve new grooves into spacetime, we might see it as the shape of those grooves themselves. Your will, your tendencies, your thoughts, all of it, might be what determines which part of the block belongs to you. You don't shape the block by acting outside it. You shape it by being the shape that you are. Think of a river. It flows according to gravity, terrain, and countless hidden influences. From above, the path is inevitable, but within the river, the current still feels free. It twists and rushes. It slows and deepens. It responds to rocks and weather and the shape of the land. It isn't arbitrary. It's responsive. Maybe we are like that. Not free in the sense of randomness, but free in the sense of depth. Our actions arise not from blank possibility, but from the whole structure of who we are. And that structure, our identity, our desires, our experience, is what gives our path meaning. Still, this doesn't end the puzzle, because at the smallest scale, physics whispers something strange. Quantum mechanics tells us that some things are not fixed, that particles don't have definite positions until they are observed, that outcomes are not written but weighed in probability, like coins spinning endlessly in the air. The future, in this view, isn't a line, it's a cloud, a shimmering haze of what could be. This tension between determinism and quantum indeterminacy leaves us with no easy answers. In some interpretations, the uncertainty is real and the future genuinely isn't set until it happens. In others, like the many worlds interpretation, every possibility already exists, not in potential, but in actuality. Every choice you didn't make still happens, just elsewhere, in another branch of the tree, in another room of the house. If that's true, then the block isn't a single sculpture, it's a gallery. Every possible version of every moment preserved and eternal. You're not just a thread in time, but one of infinite threads, all part of a tapestry too vast to imagine. You're not just the version of yourself that chose one path. All versions exist. All choices are made. And the you who chose differently is no less real. But if every outcome exists, then who are you really? Are you the sum of all possibilities, or just the version currently awake in this particular thread? Maybe identity isn't a fixed thing at all. Maybe it's a wave that collapses into one form when experienced, but which always had many shapes, many paths, hidden in its structure. You might feel singular, but the universe may see you as plural, a family of selves, walking side by side on parallel roads. This doesn't make your life less meaningful, it makes it more, because in the midst of all these variations, you are still here. You are the one living this version, feeling this feeling, choosing this choice. And even if it exists alongside others, it is still uniquely yours. Perhaps freedom isn't about what might have been. Perhaps it's about inhabiting what is, fully, completely, without hesitation, not trying to outrun the shape of time, but learning how to walk its curves with awareness. The sculpture doesn't change, but we can change how we meet it. And yet, there remains a question, one that floats just beyond language. If all possible futures already exist, if every version of you walks a different corridor, then what is it that binds your awareness to this particular thread? It's one of the most elusive questions in all of this. Why this version? Why are you aware of this sequence of moments and not another? If all branches of possibility are equally real, then why does your consciousness ride the wave it does? Why do you remember these choices, these particular mornings and silences, and not the variations where you turned left instead of right, where you said nothing instead of speaking, where a stranger never became a friend? One idea from quantum mechanics leans into this mystery, the many worlds interpretation. It says that when a quantum event can unfold in multiple ways, reality doesn't pick one, it picks all of them. Each possibility blooms into its own universe, its own thread in the fabric of the multiverse. There is no collapse. There is no decision made by nature. Every outcome is realized. Every version of you that could exist does. This idea isn't mere speculation. It arises naturally from the mathematics of quantum theory, especially if you assume the wave function, the equation that describes all possible states of a system, is something real. According to many worlds, when you decide whether or not to make a phone call, your universe branches. In one, the call is made. In another, it isn't. Both outcomes are true. Both yous continue on, unaware of the split, each thinking they've made the only choice. So then, why are you aware of this you? Why not the other? And how does your mind select from the infinite variations that stretch out with every heartbeat? Some suggest it's not selection at all. It's just continuity. You are the thread of experience that feels coherent, the you who remembers a consistent history, the one whose thoughts follow a particular rhythm. Consciousness, in this view, is not an isolated object. It's a trajectory, a path through the multiverse that stitches together moment after moment, like beads on a string. Not the only path, but the one your awareness happens to light up. Still, the mystery lingers. If all these paths exist, what makes one feel more real than the others? Maybe the sensation of reality isn't about existence. Maybe it's about attention. Your consciousness doesn't scan the entire tapestry. It moves through one thread, and that thread feels like the only one because your awareness is confined to it, not because the others aren't real, but because you never step sideways into them. That said, there are moments when people feel a slippage, a strange dislocation, a sense of being somewhere they don't quite belong, even though nothing around them has changed. We call it déjà vu, or a glitch, or intuition. And while neuroscience has its explanations, delayed perception, overlapping memory traces, there's something about these moments that feels like a window cracking open, a glimpse, perhaps, into a neighboring thread. Not enough to cross over, just enough to feel the ghost of another you, close enough to touch. And if you can imagine that countless versions of you walking countless paths, then it becomes harder to think of the future as a single line. It becomes a web, a tree, a shimmering cluster of roads. And somewhere in that web, the version of you you're living now is walking its own way forward, not randomly, not passively, but according to the structure of everything you've ever been. This brings us back to the block universe. If all these futures exist already, laid out across the multiverse, then your journey isn't about discovery, it's about traversal. You don't create the path, you reveal it one footstep at a time, and the act of walking, of experiencing, gives each step its weight. It also means that every possibility you never lived is not lost. It simply belongs to another thread, another version of you, just as real, just as valid, walking their own line through the lattice of time. You don't need to mourn what might have been, because somewhere it still is. But what does this mean for regret, for longing, for the ache of wondering what could have happened if only? Maybe it means those feelings are still true, still meaningful, but not signs of failure. They're echoes, reflections from the other paths you almost touched. They remind you that your life is a choice, not a choice made by willpower alone, but a choice made by being, by the shape of who you are. And that shape matters. It defines the version of reality your awareness inhabits. Still, even in this maze of futures, we don't remember the paths we didn't take. We remember only this one, and that gives it gravity. It means the decisions we face still matter, not because they change the whole block, but because they change where we are in it. And that's enough. You are not the sum of infinite possibilities. You are the line of one unfolding. And that line, with all its hesitations and imperfections, is still a work of astonishing detail. Still a pattern the universe makes only once. But if all versions of you exist, if all paths are part of the great geometry, then what is the future really? Not just for you, but for the world, for time itself? Is it a destination, or is it a direction? Maybe it's neither. Maybe the future isn't a place we're headed toward, or a direction we follow like a compass arrow. Maybe it's simply the part of the tapestry that hasn't yet been illuminated by our moving awareness. Just as yesterday exists in memory and now exists in sensation, the future might exist in waiting, in silence, not because it isn't real, but because it hasn't yet been touched by experience. We think of the future as empty space, a blank canvas. But what if it's already painted, already filled with details, just not yet viewed? This thought bends even more when we bring in our own biology. Our own minds are not just observers of time, they are sculptors of it. Neuroscience tells us that our sense of time isn't even continuous. It's assembled frame by frame by our brains. Just like a film made of still images that flicker past fast enough to create the illusion of motion, our consciousness strings together snapshots of perception into the flowing river we call now. Think about that for a moment. What you feel as the present is already stitched together from the past. By the time you hear a word, your brain has already processed it, filtered it, compared it to memory. There's a built-in lag, a processing window, fractions of a second long, that your mind smooths over so reality doesn't seem choppy. We're always slightly behind, slightly out of step with the world. But the mind covers the gap so well that we never notice. In fact, your brain doesn't just observe time, it edits it. Sometimes it rearranges the order of events so they make more sense. Sometimes it fills in blanks with guesses. Sometimes it even makes you feel as though something lasted longer or shorter than it actually did. Time, as experienced by the human mind, is less like a stream and more like a collage, carefully layered, gently falsified, endlessly interpreted. So what does that mean for our understanding of the future? If our present is partly illusion, assembled by a system evolved to create the feeling of continuity, then perhaps the future we imagine is part of that illusion too. Not an emptiness to be filled, but a construction based on patterns, expectations, and the deep neural music of memory and prediction. Even the feeling of moving forward through time may be a function of how the brain processes causality. When we see a glass fall and then shatter, we feel the arrow of time sharply. But flip the order, and it breaks our sense of logic. A shattered glass reassembling and leaping back to the counter feels impossible, even though the laws of physics don't prohibit it. The reason it feels wrong isn't physics, it's entropy. Entropy is that quiet, invisible drumbeat behind everything. It tells us which direction feels natural. It explains why we remember the past, but not the future. Why cooled tea doesn't warm itself, why order declines. In a low entropy state, like a freshly cleaned room, there are fewer ways things can change without becoming messier. In a high entropy state, there are many. The universe tends toward disorder, not because it wants to, but because statistically, it's the most likely outcome. And that statistical trend gives time its flavor. Not a rule etched in stone, but a flow born from probability. The future feels like a direction, not because it's written that way in the universe, but because our local experience moves along paths of increasing entropy. It's as if we're rolling downhill, not because gravity pulls us, but because there's nowhere else to go. But what if we could step outside that? Not physically, but mentally. What if we could imagine ourselves outside the flow, hovering above the slope, seeing all possible states at once? Then the feeling of direction would disappear. We wouldn't feel the future rushing toward us. We'd see it already there, just another part of the landscape, not unfolding, but simply waiting. This invites an even deeper question. What is the now, then? If the future exists and the past is still present in the block, then what makes this moment feel special? Why does it glow with immediacy while all other moments seem remote? One answer might be that the present is wherever your attention happens to be. It isn't a universal property, it's a spotlight, a highlight across the frozen geometry of time. And the strange thing is that spotlight isn't even entirely under your control. It wanders, it drifts, it returns again and again to certain memories. It leaps ahead to future fears and hopes. Sometimes it forgets where it is entirely. You can see this when you meditate, when you quiet your thoughts and try to stay rooted in the present. Almost immediately, the mind jumps forwards, backward, inward. Time, as you experience it, becomes a dance of projections. Rarely do we live purely in the moment. Even when we try, it slips away, which suggests that now is less a point in time and more a pattern of attention. So if the future already exists and the present is just the point we happen to notice, then perhaps the entire experience of flow is self-generated, not imposed by physics, but conjured by consciousness. We are time's illusion, wrapped in time's illusion, endlessly believing in forward motion. And if all this is true, then we might ask, what does it mean to change? If nothing ever becomes, if everything simply is, then what are we really doing when we grow, when we learn, when we say that someone has become different? Perhaps change doesn't mean movement through time at all. Perhaps it's the structure of the block itself, written into the geometry of reality, not happening within it. We think of change as the process of something transforming across moments. A seed becomes a sprout. A child becomes an adult. But in the block universe, all of those versions, the seeds, the sprout, the bloom, the fall, already exist. They're not transformations, they're spatially separate realities, each one eternal in its own slice of time. So, what we call change might be an illusion born of perspective, like walking along a mural painted with stages of a dance. You see the arms rising, the feet spinning, the body twirling, but only because you're moving past still images arranged in sequence. The dancer doesn't move, you do. Your perception of transformation is simply the unfolding of a static composition. And yet, there are hints in physics that this stillness might contain something stranger, something that doesn't fit neatly into the block. Enter time crystals, a concept that at first glance seems like science fiction, but isn't. These are systems that exhibit motion, or rather change, in their lowest energy state. They're not moving through space, but through time. Their internal structure repeats periodically, not across distance, but across intervals, like a pendulum that swings forever, without any energy input, never running down. Time crystals challenge the very notion that stability means stillness. They suggest that under certain conditions, change itself can be a kind of equilibrium, not something that happens to a system, but something that is the system. They're like a melody that doesn't fade, a motion that isn't powered, a future that is already repeating in quiet loops. Their existence tells us that maybe the universe has rhythms we don't yet understand, patterns that endure not in space, but in time itself. Could we be part of such a rhythm? Could consciousness, or perception, or the structure of our minds be part of a temporal pattern that cycles in ways we haven't yet grasped? Not just forward motion, but harmonic resonance, subtle repetitions that ripple through the block in patterns invisible to the naked eye. It would explain something odd, why we often feel echoes, patterns in our lives that recur not exactly, but closely enough to notice. Noticing them doesn't mean time is looping. It might mean that the underlying structure of our experience has a symmetry we haven't yet named. And if such symmetries exist, then maybe the future isn't just a space we haven't reached yet. Maybe it's a rhythm we haven't heard yet. Already there, already pulsing, waiting not to be built, but to be noticed. This idea touches something ancient in us, the sense that time isn't just a straight line, but a wheel, that seasons come in cycles, that history repeats, that the self too might return in some form, in some echo. Maybe these stories weren't mere myth. Maybe they were intuitions, primitive glimpses of a universe more subtle than our linear logic allows. Still, within all of this, we have to reconcile the feeling of novelty, the sensation that something new is always just around the corner, that tomorrow could bring a surprise, that the next moment holds something we have never seen before. How can this be if the future already exists? Maybe novelty, too, is an illusion of exposure, like turning a corner in a forest and finding a clearing that was always there, but hidden. The surprise isn't in the existence of the clearing, it's in the reveal. The geometry of space-time doesn't need to change for something to feel new. We only need to shift our perspective, to let the light of awareness fall on something previously unlit. So then, maybe change is not about alteration, but revelation. Not about things becoming different, but about different things becoming visible. And in that sense, maybe growth, personal growth, emotional change, inner transformation is not about altering the self, but about encountering more of what was always within. You are always going to become who you are becoming. That becoming is simply the slow unveiling of a structure already written in the shape of your path. Just as the acorn contains the oak, just as the sketch contains the final painting in outline form, your potential may already be etched into the block, not as fate, but as fullness waiting to unfold. But then the whisper returns, that quiet contradiction. If I am already what I will become, then why does becoming feel so fragile? Maybe fragility arises because awareness can only touch one moment at a time. Becoming feels delicate not because it's uncertain, but because we experience it through a narrow keyhole, one instant, one breath, one thought after another. We can't see the whole arc. We feel the tension of not knowing what the next moment will bring, not because it's unwritten, but because we haven't arrived at it. The structure is stable, but our traversal through it is exposed, bare, and human. This feeling of vulnerability lies at the heart of our fascination with time travel. We imagine stepping into the future, bending time, changing what has already happened or preventing what's to come. We dream of rewriting fate, but in the block universe, these desires collide with geometry. If time is fixed, if the future already exists, then time travel becomes not a trip into the unknown, but a visit to a place already marked and immutable. And yet physics doesn't forbid it. General relativity, Einstein's great gift to our understanding of space and time, allows for solutions in which time loops back on itself. These are known as closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that bring a traveler back to their own past. They're rare, buried deep within the math, and rely on exotic conditions. Immense mass, rotating black holes, or even hypothetical constructs like wormholes. But the fact remains, they are not impossible. The paradoxes they invite, however, are immediate. If you went back and altered something, say warned your younger self, or prevented an event from occurring, what then? If you succeed, then the event never happened. But if it never happened, why would you have traveled back to stop it? This is the famous grandfather paradox, and it strikes at the core of our understanding of causality. Some physicists propose that such paradoxes would be resolved naturally, not by preventing time travel, but by preventing contradictions. The Novikov self-consistency principle suggests that any actions taken by a time traveler were always part of history to begin with. You can go back, but you cannot change anything in a way that would make the trip impossible. If you dropped a glass in the past, that broken glass was always meant to be there. The loop is closed. The path is self-consistent. This doesn't mean time travel becomes trivial. It means that even if we could move through the block out of order, we'd still be confined to its geometry. The shape would not be altered by our motion through it. The future would remain intact, not because it resists change, but because change is already accounted for. Like walking through a maze and realizing every twist and turn is precisely what brought you to the end. But what about freedom? What about the idea that our knowledge of the future could allow us to escape it, bend it, undo it? In a self-consistent block, this desire becomes a kind of illusion. You can learn what's coming, you can act upon it, But whatever you do, that reaction was already part of the structure. The future you're trying to avoid already includes your attempt to avoid it. So then, what is the point of trying? What is the purpose of striving, of learning, of making decisions, if everything is already embedded in the shape of space-time? Perhaps it's this: the experience of choosing is real, even if the outcome is fixed. The path you walk includes every moment of hesitation, every flicker of doubt, every triumph, and every failure. They are not illusions, they are experiences, and they matter. Not because they change the universe, but because they fill it. Without them, the structure would be hollow. The block would be sterile, silent, inert. Instead, it is alive with consciousness, with meaning, with presence, not because anything is becoming, but because everything is being lived. And if closed time-like curves exist, if we ever find ourselves circling through time, then those loops won't erase choice. They will amplify it. You will know the shape of what's coming. You will still walk through it. And in doing so, you will make it real. There's a strange comfort in this. The future, even if it's set, is still yours, not to alter, but to encounter, not to rewrite, but to reveal. And every moment you approach it, you give it life, not by changing it, but by being there. Still, another question stirs beneath the surface. If time loops can exist, could it be that our entire universe is inside one? It's a question both eerie and majestic. Could the entire universe be caught in a loop, repeating itself not because of chance, but because that's the shape it was always meant to trace? Could we be inside a cosmic version of a closed time-like curve, not just as travelers within a moment, but as participants in a universe that loops in time the way a circle closes in space? If so, then everything we see, the birth of galaxies, the fading of stars, the rise and fall of civilizations, has happened before and will happen again, not in sequence, but as part of a grand, unchanging pattern. There's no evidence yet that our universe loops like this, but the mathematics of general relativity doesn't rule it out. Some solutions to Einstein's equations suggest that space-time can curl in on itself under the right conditions. The universe could be finite in time, just as it might be finite in space. It could repeat not because of a ticking clock, but because of how the whole shape of reality curves back on itself. And if it does, that would mean the future is not just real, it's familiar, not just ahead of us, but behind us, woven into a fabric with no loose threads. Cosmologists have long studied what lies beyond the visible horizon of our universe. What happens out there, beyond the reach of our instruments, beyond even the edge of the observable cosmos? There's a limit to how far light can travel in the time since the Big Bang. That limit forms a boundary, not of the universe itself, but of what we can see. It's called the cosmological horizon, and it hides from us the vast majority of what exists. What's beyond that horizon is still part of reality, but it remains inaccessible. We will never see it, never know it. It lies forever outside our light cone, forever beyond our grasp. But its existence challenges our assumption that the known is the whole. It reminds us that our experience, as immediate as it feels, is limited to a small pocket of a much larger whole. And if there are parts of the universe we can never observe, then the same might be true for parts of time. There may be regions of the future, not just distant in years, but distant in structure, that we cannot reach, not because they haven't happened, but because we are not connected to them. They lie beyond the horizon of our timeline, just as distant galaxies lie beyond our visual reach. In that sense, the future doesn't wait for us. It exists, but it exists in a silence we'll never break. Some events are not just unknown, they are unknowable, not because we lack information, but because the structure of reality denies us access. We live in a subset of the block. Our consciousness threads only part of the sculpture. The rest remains shadowed, inaccessible not just in space, but in time. This raises a subtle shift in our thinking. The future isn't hidden from us by chance, it's hidden by geometry. The block universe may be filled with paths, but not all paths intersect. Some versions of you may never see certain outcomes, not because those outcomes aren't real, but because they're on a separate page, a part of the story you'll never read, even though it lies just inches away in the book. From here, we can start to ask something even deeper. What does it mean for something to be real if no one ever sees it? Is an unseen future still part of the universe's truth? Or does it only become real when touched by awareness, when someone looks and remembers or acts and feels? Many physicists say yes, reality doesn't need an observer. The block exists whether or not consciousness moves through it. But others wonder whether observation is more than passive reception. Perhaps it's participation. Perhaps consciousness doesn't create the structure, but animates it. It brings it into color, into temperature, into sensation. And without that participation, perhaps the future stays forever unlit. A room fully furnished, but never entered. This isn't mysticism. It's a question rooted in the strange, persistent riddles of quantum physics. When does a possibility become actual? Is a particle's position real before it is measured? And if so, what does measurement mean? Does looking at something make it real, or just select which part of the block becomes your path? In the farthest reaches of cosmology, the same question echoes in a new form. If parts of the universe lie beyond our horizon, do they still count as part of the present? Do they matter to us if we can never interact with them, never send light their way, never receive a message back? And this leads us to the borderlands of philosophy, where physics and meaning collide. If the future exists but cannot be accessed, if its truths are sealed off from our experience, then what role does it play in our lives? Is it guidance? Is it gravity? Is it destiny? Or is it something quieter, something more like silence itself, present, deep, and always just beyond the reach of language? Maybe that silence is not emptiness, but stillness, a kind of cosmic pause that wraps around the illusion of motion. Perhaps what we call the flow of time is not the world moving forward, but consciousness sweeping a light across the sculpture of space-time. Our minds aren't boats drifting down a river. They're searchlights scanning the shape of something already there. The sensation of time passing might be nothing more than a sequence of awakenings, moment to moment, like footsteps echoing through a corridor already built. This view, strange as it seems, challenges one of the most deeply held assumptions of human experience: that time flows, that it has a direction, that it leaves the past behind and brings the future forward. But physics doesn't confirm this direction. The fundamental equations of nature work just as well in reverse. The symmetry of time at the microscopic level doesn't care whether the glass is falling or rising, whether the particle is decaying or coalescing. It only obeys the rules. The asymmetry, the arrow of time, is not written into the laws. It arises from entropy, from statistics, from how collections of particles behave, not from how the universe itself is structured. So what then is becoming? If the laws don't prefer forward over backward, and if the block universe holds all of time in place, then what is it that makes us feel like we're always heading somewhere? That there is something not yet arrived, something still unfolding? It may be that becoming is an artifact of perception, that we live in a cognitive rhythm tuned to change, and we register now only because we compare it constantly to before. The feeling of time advancing is perhaps no more fundamental than the feeling of movement while standing still in a train station, watching another train glide past. One moves, one doesn't. But which one is truly in motion? Maybe we only feel time because we expect it. From the moment we are born, we are immersed in cause and effect, in heartbeat after heartbeat. Our brains adapt, evolve, and learn to anticipate. We become creatures of prediction, and from that predictive engine arises the sense of flow, a continuous unfolding of what's next, rooted not in what the universe is doing, but in how the mind is interpreting its place within it. You can test this in small ways. Think of how time feels when you're waiting. It stretches, pulls, resists. A minute becomes elastic. Now think of how it feels when you're engaged, present, immersed. Time slips past unnoticed, even though the clock hasn't changed its pace. This subjectivity suggests that time, as we feel it, isn't tied to the world, but to the way we're moving through it. Or perhaps, more precisely, to how we believe we're moving through it. This belief might be necessary. It helps us construct a sense of self, a continuity across moments. Without it, we would be a series of disconnected impressions, a flicker of pain here, a burst of joy there, but no story to tie it together. The illusion of time's flow gives us identity. It allows us to say, I was, and I will be, and make sense of both as part of a coherent existence. But if that identity is built on an illusion, does that make it less real? Not necessarily. The illusion itself is real. It shapes your world. It shapes your decisions. It shapes your feeling of responsibility and love and loss. The light that moves across the sculpture may not change the sculpture, but it changes what is seen, what is known, what is felt. The architecture may be static, but experience is not. So maybe that's what time is. Not a river, not a dimension, not a ticking mechanism, but a structure made visible through experience. Not a thing that happens, but a lens through which happening is understood. And the future, in that lens, is not ahead. It's hidden. Not because it's waiting to be made, but because it hasn't yet been noticed. And still, as we move through this noticing, we encounter a curious contradiction. We know the laws of physics are reversible, symmetric. We know entropy gives us the arrow of time. We know our sense of forward motion might be just a cognitive artifact. And yet, we continue to speak of time as if it moves, as if the past is gone and the future is arriving. We talk of next week, next year, next breath, as if something new is always just about to be born. Why? Maybe because that illusion is too powerful to shed. Maybe because without it, we would have no momentum, no story, no hope. To feel time moving is to feel alive. It allows us to dream, to anticipate, to strive. Even if it's only perception, even if the future is already carved into the block, that perception gives meaning to each moment of awakening. It turns geometry into narrative. It turns existence into a journey. So we continue to act as if the future is arriving. We open the curtain in the morning. We make plans for dinner. We celebrate birthdays. We grieve endings. We believe in progress, in growth, in becoming. Even if it's all part of the shape that never changes, our lived experience of that shape is rich, is fluid, and human. But still, just before sleep, just before surrender, the question lingers. If all things exist in the block already, unchanging, eternal, precise, then why do we still chase the future as if it can be caught? Maybe it's because the chase is what gives the illusion its beauty. Even if we never catch the future, even if it's always been quietly there, unblinking and complete, the act of reaching toward it animates the stillness. Like a child running down a hallway that has no end, joy comes not from arrival, but from motion, from breath, from the echo of footsteps in a place where all the walls have already been built. And though we cannot see the end point, we trust in its shape. We feel the curve of time bending us forward, not because it has to, but because we are built to follow it. We live our lives as if they were open fields, but in the block universe, they are more like gardens already planted. The future is not something that blooms at our feet as we walk. It's already there, in full, from seed to fruit to decay. We do not plant new outcomes. We walk among what has always been growing. But that doesn't rob life of its tenderness. If anything, it amplifies it. Knowing that this breath, this glance, this goodbye was always written into the fabric of time makes it no less intimate. Perhaps it makes it more so. Because in this view, nothing is lost. No moment vanishes. No smile disappears. Every step you've taken, every word you've spoken, remains suspended in the lattice of space-time, eternally occupying its own sliver of the structure. The past does not fade. It exists in full detail, as real as the moment you're living now. The same is true for what lies ahead. You just haven't reached that part of the sculpture, but it's there, waiting, quiet, unmoved. And what of death then? What of endings? In a block universe, death is not annihilation. It's a location, a point in time that is as real and enduring as your first birthday, your last laugh, the moment you first saw a sunrise and didn't look away. Nothing in space-time is erased. The version of you that laughed, that loved, that learned will always be there. The last breath is not a closing door, but one more thread in the great design, one more note in the song already sung. It may be that consciousness, too, is just a part of the block, a pattern, a structure. But if that's the case, then maybe you are not confined to this thread. Maybe what you think of as self is just the awareness moving along a sequence, like a reader turning pages in a novel that's already complete. And maybe, just maybe, that reader continues. Not because you leap to another world or another life, but because the block contains other stories, other roots, other shapes for attention to explore. But these are quiet questions for quiet hours, not questions to answer, but to hold, like warm stones in the palm of the mind. We can't know what lies beyond perception. We can only drift through the narrow hallway of now, one footfall at a time, watching the walls change as we go. And maybe that's enough to know that time doesn't have to move for life to feel full, that motion isn't needed for meaning, that stillness can hold an entire universe, and that the glow of awareness, even if brief, brings the sculpture to life. So now, as you lie still in the gentle darkness, listening to your own quiet breath, you are not waiting for the future. You are part of it. You always were. The moment ahead is already etched into the shape of forever. All you have to do is let yourself arrive in it. And somewhere in that silent arrival, the rest of the universe holds its breath, not because it waits for you, but because it already remembers you being here, exactly like this.